I am very, very pleased to be here tonight for a number of reasons. First of all, the future builders, the work you're doing to publicize sickle cell anemia, the education work you're doing related to sickle cell anemia is critically important to me. And so when Bruce called me about being here, it was a done deal. And I'll take a few minutes and tell you why. But let me take just another quick trip, and then I'll build to what I'd like to communicate with you tonight. I've picked up some degrees along the way, and as Bruce says, you know, I've got some education. About 40-some years ago, obviously I didn't know a whole lot because I carried the sickle cell trait. My wife carried the sickle cell trait, and you know the routine. You know the statistics. 1 out of 4, if you take it to that end, could possibly have sickle cell anemia. And so I didn't know enough at that point in time to be able to make the right decision, because I can promise you, I can tell you, David Christopher Rainey, I love that young man dearly. I am very, very glad he's here. If I were given the choice, knowing what I know, watching that young man live in pain all these years, there is no way, folks, no matter how smitten I was, that I would even take that chance. I wouldn't do it. So anytime there's an initiative that addresses the issue of education as it relates to sickle cell, I'm going to be there. I'll do whatever I can to support it because that's critical. You know, we talk about sickle cell, the sickle cell disease, and the very fact that we need additional medical resources, and that is true. That is very, very true. Leading that charge should be the issue of education, because we can control our own destiny here. And with education, we can be prepared to make the right decisions and help stamp out sickle cell anemia. The young man that I spoke about earlier is, his name is David Christopher Rainey. At this point in time, he's 42. And let me tell you, I was saying to someone tonight, Ms. Conley, I think I said to Ms. Conley, I was telling him about Christopher, and I said he's 42. She said, oh my goodness, that's great. Folks, are you listening? He's only 42 years old, Ms. Conley, because she knows what happens in terms of sickle cell adults. She was happy that he was 42. Amen. I'm happy he's 42. But should that be our reality? I say no, it should not be our reality. When I was talking to Kavion earlier and I asked him what grade he was, he said, I'm second going on to third. Do you hear me, folks? I'm second going on to third. I love the optimism of these young folks, because he's second grade, but he's going to third. We've been able to do some things in terms of the sickle cell fight. As Bruce talked about, I had an opportunity while in the legislature to sponsor some legislation that created the Sickle Cell Task Force. And I'm telling you, if you Google these folks and go online, they did outstanding, fabulous work. And all I need to say is the first name, Jermaine, who actually chaired that group. I can mention Ms. Trotter, who was on that task force. I can mention Dr. Elders, who was on that task force, Dr. West on that task force. Let me just say this. We sent out invitations to medical people, asking them if they would serve on that task force. Everybody said yes. Everybody said yes. And the work they did set the stage for the wonderful work that Representative Murdoch did in his Bill 1604 that created the Sickle Cell Clinic at UAMS. Now, to borrow Kavion's theme again, that's just the beginning. Because let me tell you a little bit more about David Christopher Rainey. When he was born, we were just getting to know about sickle cell anemia, and so he was identified early to have sickle cell anemia. And it was recommended that I take him to a specialist, and I did. I took him to Dr. Laureline Bruce Reed. At that time, she practiced in Pine Bluff. She was outstanding. She was outstanding. She gave me advice about how to take care of him and how not to assume that he was just like everybody else. She said to me, if he has a fever, let me tell you what you do. You get him to the doctor. He had a hearing deficiency, and I said, Dr. Bruce, maybe we can operate and get this hearing straightened out. She said, absolutely not. Let's let him grow up and see how it happens, how it works for him. So she didn't. She suggested that I not rush to have people cut on him. Now, for a father who knew absolutely nothing about sickle cell, this was critical information that I needed to have. So Dr. Bruce was able to give that information to me. So then I was able to handle my responsibilities with Christopher just a bit better. But that's not the story with most sickle cell patients. They have difficulties in terms of getting the medical treatment they need, the difficulty of having people totally understand their limitations, and that's a challenge that I think exists even now. How many of you are acquainted with someone who has sickle cell anemia? Would you just raise your hands, please? Okay. So you know that every day they're in pain. You know that. Chris has challenges with ulcers on a regular basis because sometimes he doesn't eat exactly the way he ought to eat, and he has this issue with not drinking enough water, a bunch of things. But every day he gets up and he goes to work like everyone else. And so I talk about Christopher because, in essence, he's my hero. So I love this kid for more than one reason. Every day he's in pain, and every day he gets up and he goes to work. And I asked him one time, because let me say this. This is amazing to me, because the doctors who treated him as an adult have encouraged him to apply for disability. All right, now, the doctors who treated him as an adult who has sickle cell anemia have encouraged him to apply for disability. Medical doctors have encouraged him to do that because they know how debilitating this disease is. And what is just totally, what I totally just don't get and understand is, if the medical profession sees this as a debilitating disease, as a limiting disease, why doesn't everybody else get it? Why then, in our society, would we stand for not having the best possible care? I am excited about the Sickle Cell Clinic. I promise you I am. Because I see that as being the beginning of getting sickle cell patients the kind of help and assistance they need. The beginning of spreading the issue related to education so we're better informed. So I'm all for that. I just wonder why so late in the game? Why so late in the game? Because people with sickle cell disease have been dying earlier than the rest of us forever. It's not an accident that people celebrate people who have the sickle cell disease who are 42. That's not an accident. They die sooner. So as a society, we shouldn't tolerate it. Whatever I can do, personally, professionally, I will do it, because as a society, we shouldn't tolerate it. And I'm not just talking as a dad who has watched his son struggle all these years. Not just talking as a dad. I feel that same compassion for anyone. Mr. Lockett told me that I needed to just have a conversation with you and not to be long-winded. So I'm moving toward getting to the end of this. But there are some people that I have just got to mention, and I mentioned just a couple a minute ago. But when we got that legislation passed to create the task force, that meant absolutely nothing. Anybody can get legislation passed to do about anything as long as it doesn't cost money. So getting the task force in place wasn't a giant accomplishment on my part. What was really special was getting money attached to that task force so they could actually get the work done that they needed to do. So I have to recognize Senator Joyce Elliott, who most people don't understand is one of the heroes in terms of putting $100,000 toward that sickle cell task force. Senator Ruth Whitaker, who put $58,000 toward that sickle cell task force. Now, I get a lot of recognition because I carried the legislation. Folks, I only had $50,000 to put in that. It could not have survived with just $50,000 because the work that task force did set the stage for Representative Murdoch's legislation. And so, we've come some distance already. But we're just in second grade going to third. And that's how we've got to see it. That's how we must see it. So I'll go wherever I can and do whatever I can do to rally the forces because, folks, when someone has sickle cell anemia, it shouldn't be a foregone conclusion that they will die early. It shouldn't be. You would love this guy, Christopher. He has 3 sons. One is a freshman in college. Another is 9th grade going to the 10th grade. And the last one, they're all boys, is a 4th grader going to the 5th grade. People who know this family, Chris and Teresa, have wonderfully behaved children. I'm not just saying that because they're my grandchildren. These young people need both their mom and their dad. They're growing up strong and healthy, and they're growing up with good positive attitudes because they have those two adults there helping them and leading the way. They didn't need their dad to die early. I'm not talking about just Chris here, y'all. I'm talking about every other sickle cell person who has sickle cell anemia. They need a shot at it just like Chris has a shot at it. And what you do, Ms. Conley, Ms. Martin, what you do here will help tell this story, get people moving forward so that our sickle cell patients have a better future. And thank you for listening.